that you're going to provide to me, and I might debate and ask you some questions on it or educate me on, but I've learned to be quiet about it because I don't know. And when I got to know and I got educated and that kind of stuff, I understand how much I was programmed. Right? I started that institution, I was 24 years old, and you realize how much I was programmed by media, I was programmed by the system to think that way, right? And then when I meet the gun owners, and I told you family members, I met my beautiful wife, I met my brother-in-law in the States, and beautiful people, right? Law-abiding citizens, gun owners.
Absolutely. I will share with you why I am so passionate or how I got hooked onto this sport. I never came from a family of hunters. I don't hunt. I mean, I have my hunting license, but I don't hunt, but I love to shoot. What really got me more involved in it was the fact that when you went to the gun range, you left your ego of who you were at the doorstep. As soon as you entered that club, it never mattered whether you were a doctor, you were a mechanic, you were a baker, you were a businessman, or you were just whatever profession you were. It was all left outside. What were you? You were a fellow gun owner. You were a fellow shooter. This is how we determine. So we have female shooters with us. So you can imagine one female and we're a group of 20 males. And whenever they come into the range, they don't feel out of place because generally they are known as a fellow shooter. You respect her as a fellow shooter. We stop looking at whether she's a female, male, nothing. She's just a fellow shooter. So now we do a lot of competitions. We participate in what is called IDPA, which is Indoor Defense Pistol Association. The rules are very stringent in this shooting sport. Safety is number one. We police ourselves and we guard ourselves a lot more harder than anybody else would. So give you an idea what happens in the sport. We set up a match, and if we were going through a shooting scenario, so the basic game and the purpose of the game is skill and accuracy. So you are always competing with yourself. This is totally about self. You're always going to be competing with yourself, trying to better yourself at a sport, which is a sport. Mm-hmm. So in IDPA, when we shoot, the rules are stringent. So let's say Demetre is a shooter. I am his what is called a safety officer. So I have to go through qualification. I have to certify to become a safety officer. And when he shoots, I am at the arm's length of him, watching his firearm, what it is doing. We have rules where if the firearm goes past 90 degrees of your shooting, of your view, I will touch his hand, hold his hand, and he is going to be disqualified. And we're going to shame him for the rest of the night, because he should know better that safety is first.
And I said I went to the range in December in the Carolinas, and I felt that respect. As a Canadian, I came in, I didn't know anybody there, and I felt right away exactly what you described. Leave whatever you have, your hat at the door,
yes.
and you're part of a group. Yes. You're an equal amongst a group, and there's a fellowship. Yes. And I sensed that, and I sensed that like there was a really there's a cannon. It was a pistol, but it was a cannon this guy had, and everybody congregated around him because when it went off, like you couldn't miss it. It was like wow, right? And the kick on it, right? But and do you want to try it and that kind of stuff? And that like they didn't know me from, but it was exactly what you described, right? And it was I felt the sport. When I was there, yes. I felt the sport, the target practice, the different drills, and some people were following and that kind of stuff, and the conversation around it. So it was no different than playing poker, or yes. No different than going to a car show. When you go to a car show as a customer, or go to a car show as a car owner, right? Two different things, right? It's like buying a quilt or be part of a quilt club. Like ladies and men out there, once you know something, right, and through knowledge, training, and experience, and you can speak from that. And I'm going to go back to the firearms being removed, right? That's a possibility now in this country, correct?
Absolutely.
There will come a time that somebody's going to come down with a hammer, and they're going to say, this is what you're going to do with these weapons. right?
Firearms.
Firearms, sorry,
Yeah.
see, sorry about that. The firearms, and that's how they're correcting me, right? Soon I'm gonna get. So the firearm, when they start, again, I said a moment ago, a lot of those individuals that own those types of firearms are law enforcement themselves, right? They are in that field.
Absolutely.
Will they go and because they're registered?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's sad, because imagine you're gonna get 10 cents on the dollar on something, you're gonna have to get it removed or taken away from you, or.
That wasn't for sale in the first place.
That was, I like that, but it wasn't for sale, right? It's yours. Somebody dictated to you that you're gonna sell your collection, whatever collection it is, you're gonna sell it, and you're gonna sell it at a price I'm gonna tell you, right? And I'm gonna make it law.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are gonna be law enforcement themselves, enforcing something they can't stand, right? And will there be a possibility that a lot of these people that are law enforcement that will find ways not to give up their collections, right? Is there, because if you look at it, I'm telling you that there's going to be a lot of animosity on this for individuals that should not be stained. There's a stain there because you own this type of firearm.
If I can build off of that there. So remember we talked about the restricted firearms versus the non-restricted, okay? So that list that came out, there was a lot of non-restricted firearms that were on there. These are not,
shotguns.
yeah, so, and they keep updating it, well, they keep adding daily, or say weekly or monthly, more firearms onto there without telling us. There's no notice that goes out from the CFO or the RCMP saying, oh, by the way, Paresh and Nick, these 6 guns we just added.
So let me ask you something. Once they flip that switch, right? And that's how it happens. Just flip the switch tomorrow morning. You know, this is COVID-19, and this is what you're gonna do. Right? So once they flick that switch, they tell you. Do they know that every single one of those firearms, the addresses and everything, correct?
The restricted ones, yes.
The restricted
the
ones,
restricted
yes.
ones.
And the non-restricted ones,
They have no idea.
They have no idea.
It could be sold 5 times over.
I could have sold it to Paresh could have sold it to Nick.
so how many of those non-restricted ones are on that list compared to what the percentage wise? Is it 60-40, 50-50?
The list started as 1,500 firearms. I can't go through all of them.
Yeah.
So I have it
There's
as
100.
There's a lot in Canada.
1500, It
The
started.
first one.
The first list.
That's the first.
And just to add on to that first
How
one.
many of those are restricted?
That back to, I couldn't read the
Well,
whole
okay,
Okay.
so the shooting, the initial restriction was on AR-15s.
Correct, and it broke it down by manufacturer and mod.
So that initial 1,500 was, let's say majority was restricted. It was more the AR-15,
So can you
the
explain
assault
to
rifle.
people what AR stands for first? Because this is the biggest
Okay, so-
misconception out there.
AR, I don't know if you know, it stands for Armalite, not assault rifle.
You see that? See, I'm glad because I thought it was assault rifle.
No.
See, and
So
back,
Armalite is a manufacturer.
Exactly.
See, Armalite.
back to the terminology, and it seems to be a thing every day now that we hear, and it's starting to become normal. We don't use assault rifle. Assault's an action, it's not an object. You can assault with anything.
As we talked about.
And that's what really aggravates us a lot too, because when the police officers have the same AR-15 platform firearms, but when they use it and they have it, it's called a patrol rifle.
Patrol carbine.
Patrol carbine.
It's the same thing, but just
Yeah.
now. It's
Yeah, I like what Nick said right there about the assault. You can assault with anything, right? If you look at today's laws and regulations and world police, that we see that the world is covered with it now. Like everybody's a police officer, everybody's law enforcement, everybody's a sheriff, right? Every assault, you raising your voice at your co-worker, your child is assault now.
Yes.
Right? So and now and you're right when you look at that way. And this is where that whole frustrating part of it, right? The assault rifle. Again, most people think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
They've
I
used the
thought that's what it
terminology
is.
so loosely and every time that
The
people.
media does.
The media
The
does.
media does. The politicians do.
Yeah.
Right? The dramatization. You know, and I look at if you look at what's going on in the U.S. right now, and Floyd, the situation, the death of the gentleman with the law enforcement, right? And you look at George Floyd, and you look at the death. What transpired there? Since then, there's been a hell of a lot more deaths, right? On all sides, on all counts, and murders and beatings and everything. And then before that and during that, there was tons of deaths and all that stuff, right? But that one there, you know, when I look at, when you look at the ceiling, it was more dramatized maybe because the officers captured face, you can see right in his eyes, you can hear his voice, George Floyd, you can hear him talking. The video captured, it's so dramatized, but it's also, we're gonna take the drama, but it's also not an agenda, but a perfect timing.
Yes.
Right? So it was a perfect timing for what's going on right now for certain groups. And they prepared a battle. The same thing happened in Nova Scotia.
So,
Nova Scotia, what transpired there, it was tragic. And we have politicians that are just waiting in the background to jump on something. And there's groups out there waiting in the background that don't want you to have firearms, regardless of who you are, because of control. Because they don't want firearms and people, and you just mentioned that whole unrestricted, they don't want any of that. They want you to go and recycle at 10 cents on a dollar, whichever it's going to be, because what they use is this sad, tragic situation. They took the drama from it, and with drama, you can create momentum, and that momentum, they use that momentum for their agenda to get rid of firearms. And that's why that list is growing.
Yeah.
And that's why you keep saying that, like, it started at 1,500, now they keep adding. That's why. Because now they're, just like the fueling that's going on in the US, same momentum is going on for this, in this country for that. And then when they do flick this switch, what's gonna happen then?
there was a politician in Chicago, he became mayor, Rahm Emanuel, and he was quoted on video and audio saying, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And that's exactly what's going on with this. It was a crisis with the Nova Scotia and the George Floyd, and they're just taking it and using it as much as they can to
But going after the wrong people.
well, but they want to have an agenda,
Correct.
like it or not.
They're going after, you're 100% right. And they want to remove firearms and that kind of stuff, and they're using these dramatic momentum moments of life to fulfill their need, right? And they wait for them. Right? It's like land banking. When you're looking at business, it's like you're buying land and you wait, right? And these people, these are political powers, and they go with the flavor of the day, the political, and when something like this happens, right, they already have plan B.
Yeah.
It's already formulated, it's already written up, they already got the policies and procedures, they got everything done up already, right? The mission statement is written, and they're going in. So flick that switch, it's on, right? A phone call 3 in the morning, this prior, okay, plan B, right? That's what I feel is going on in this country, right? And they do that, they use these momentum moments of life to do so. And why do they go after, you guys, if you were to be impartial, and if you were listening to understand, and what you guys describe, the process you go through to get firearms, and what to maintain the right to own that firearm, and if you understand that, and if you feel their sincerity in that, these are not the people that you want to be removing or attempting to remove something that they enjoy, no different than quilting, no different than a car show, like I talked about earlier, right?
If you go back to your initial opening statement, is that we were at a march today.
Yeah.
To bring knowledge and the attention to what's going on.
Protest, yeah,
Protest.
silently protest.
Now let's compare what we did today and what you got and what everybody knows now. We walk a very fine line in terms of what we can and cannot do with a firearm, what we can and cannot do with our words, our fists, in terms of assaulting people. We cannot, I don't want to say afford, but we do not want to lose our ability to own firearms. Now look at the march today. It was peaceful, like you said earlier. No cars were set on fire, no city was burnt down, no apartment building, nobody was hurt. Garbage wasn't strewn all over on the ground. No looting, no glass was shattered, no spray painting, nothing. We walked around, we did what we were supposed to do by law. We came back, by law, we spoke, and then we left. We dispersed. Now let's contrast that to the BLM movement, or any in the States. What's happening? People without firearms are burning down cities, breaking into cars, hurting people, assaulting people. Now let's go back to the politician here in Canada and what you just said. Who is more of a threat to the average Canadian citizen? Us? No, we cannot afford to assault somebody and lose our.
Listen to what he's saying here, right? They have so much fear of losing an ability of doing something they enjoy, they will do 10 times, make sure that you walk the line, the thin white line, right? You will make sure that, and when you're talking about the BLM movement, all that stuff that's going on in the US, what's interesting about that is a lot of those things that are happening are in those mindset societies or cities, that kind of stuff, that are against firearm owners.
Democrats.
The people that are against firearm owners, that everything you guys described here, and then the fine line you're walking on to maintain that, is hated by that mindset, the ones that are burning buildings, flipping cars, murdering and killing, because somebody got killed. Right? Right? Let's treat racism with more racism. Right? And we saw that with Trudeau right now in this country, right? And I don't want to get political here, but right now the political party that's at hand, that have made this decision, is that party, right? Is that government. And they're the ones that put that 1,500 firearms on there, and they keep adding to it. And they're the ones that stained you, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, and this is what I was informed of, which I did not know, but I believe Mr. Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, was an avid hunter or hunted himself, right? So you how can you walk that path and speak against it, right?
When you fully know what the rules.
When you ought or should know, right? And it'd be like me, like I love fasting, like somebody speaking against it, or advocating against it, or fighting against it, right? Or putting sticks in your wheel just so that I could appease this. Right? If I can appease this, whether it's more money, more power, more control, longer in politics, right? So, and that's why when I hear that, I'm like, well, he's a hunter himself. Like, come on, right?
A lot of the hunters as well, though, cause us problems because they also get into the problem. But who needs a firearm?
Yeah, who needs
a firearm?
Who needs an AR? I just need my shotgun to go hunting. I'm on both sides. I hunt and I competitive shoot as well. So
there is those people that say we don't need them as well.
So our community, as a firearms community, I don't want to say it's split, but there is a bit of a rift. So a lot of hunters will say, oh, I'm not going to go to the protest, I'm not going to worry, I'm not going to online vote because they're not going to take my hunting guns away. Well, now look what's happened. A lot of shotguns. The start was the AR-15, and now it's trickled down to bolt action, lever action, shotguns are now deemed prohibited.
And I'm gonna speak to the hunters out there right now about hanging with your own and supporting your own. And if you look at the principle of unions, right? And this is news to me about the hunters now, because you're not firearms or target shooters or whatever, you're hunters and you won't support that. It's the same family. It's the same family, and you guys should band together, and you should vote together, and you should be united, because exactly what you just described when you were saying that. The first thought in my mind, they're gonna get pulled in, right? That you're because you're fragmented or you're not strong. Now your firearms are part of that list, right? And now, how does it feel, right? So you should have stood strong.
Absolutely.
And it's quiet. So a lot of these new firearms are being added on, the bolt action and that. We don't find out, again, from an official letter from the government. We find out through someone else doing deeper investigations on our behalf. So a lot of these hunters still don't know that their firearms are prohibited now.
And you know how you get this information? Right here. Just like everything in the world right now, a lot of the information, you're not going to get it from the sources that you should be getting it from. You're getting it through the sharing of personal people-to-people information.
Well, back to that statement, May 1st was the deadline, and now those firearms are prohibited. Say you're a person that doesn't do social media. You don't watch the news. You don't read the papers. There's some people out there. Yeah. The only way I found out about this whole thing is Facebook. They didn't send me a letter allowing me to know that May 1st is the deadline. So if I were to just continue on my life the way it was, and I took my firearm to the range May 2nd, I would be in trouble.
Our letters came out.
I got mine 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later, we got an official letter saying your AR or of these firearms that are on the 1,500 firearms on this list, you own 2 of them.
No, you didn't get that till months later.
Till months later.
I just got mine like last month. But originally the first letter came out 4 weeks after.
So I'm going to put on my regulatory hat, right? I'm gonna put it on. You ought or should know better. How dare you, Nick, not know? And I'm telling you, that's how the law
No,
works.
it's the ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
The ignorance of the law is not an excuse, and I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you that I used to be an enforcement type officer, and today, and the business that I run, like, you have to be IBM. You have to be data from Star Trek to know everything. And even the people in those positions, you will call their departments, they won't know. I deal with governance type departments on every given day, and sometimes I'll go by 4, 5, 6 people before they give me the answers because they don't know, right? But you just said you found out through Facebook, not an official letter which you should have received, right? But if something was to happen, you're still going to lose. No, you'll guarantee you'll lose. And because the system will say you ought or should have known, and ignorance of the law is not. So this is this is why these podcasts are important. This is why this information is important to pass out, and this is why I wanted to have this podcast, right? Because when I knew you were coming, and I know you as a person, and I actually looked it up. When you told me about that, you're coming to Ottawa, I looked it up, and I found a lot of there's some really good groups out there that advocate strongly for you guys, and it's some of them are podcasts, some of the radios, and that kind of stuff, and those that put it together. I was impressed, you know what I mean? Well spoken, right? Members of society, integral fabrics of our society, check yourselves, and that's why it's like how much of everything are you going to take from us, right? Like just because you don't see the strings doesn't mean they're not there, right? And that's a line I heard from actually a Netflix series, and I loved it. And it's because we're being controlled like puppets, right? And you're gonna tell you know that little stick thing they walk around with puppets? Well, just because you don't see the string doesn't mean they're not there. And this control they're doing and taking away everything and putting you on a list, and you're gonna do, like in this country, you need a license for everything.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
Right? But they can still have babies right now. There's people that should not have babies, but they can still have babies, right? But everything else, you need a license for every, like think about that.
Take a marriage license. Before.
Yeah.
You gotta pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Paresh was mentioning there about personal property.
Yes.
So when we were at the march, there was a lot of signs that were up there just saying, so-and-so politician's a crook, is a criminal, whatever. But his main concern, which should be all of our concerns, even you as a non-firearms owner, is our property rights are being affected with this. Our property is being potentially taken from us. If it starts here, where does it end? And we'll go back to the automobile. Do automobiles need to go faster than 120 kilometers an hour? Do they need more than 100 horsepower? Yeah.
Just to have the means to buy a Corvette, why do you need it?
Why do we need it? So
How dare you want a nice fast car?
So
A motorcycle. It's a big bullet.
let's go back to the non-firearms owner. What if you got a letter in the mail saying you have 3 vehicles? Let's say you own 2 vehicles. You have 2 vehicles. Both of them have over 400 horsepower. They go faster than 120 kilometers an hour. We deem those a threat because automobiles kill more people than anything else in the right? You have 1 year to get rid of that car, or we'll give you market value for it. How would you feel? That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And what Demetre's saying is the point is just like that, you can get it removed. Just like that, right? You bought it legally, you follow the rules and regulation, you own it as your piece of property, and just like that, they can take it away from you at the flick of a switch because of a political power, because it can start with one individuals in politics. And when you mentioned politicians a moment ago and the corruption, the signs now, there's some very good politicians out there. And there's some very respectful, smart politicians that have the knowledge, training, and experience, and have walked in those shoes that can speak to you honestly about, and they'll defend you guys. They will sit here. Absolutely. And pay taxes.
Yeah, see, they brought back up here, the government was more than happy to take the tax for that firearm that was purchased.
So listen to what he just said, right? It's like, no, but it's true. It's like when you're selling stuff and like a car, right? You keep reselling the car, you keep paying taxes on a resold car, you keep paying tax. And the same thing, they were okay to take that tax from your gun.
John, and I have a things to say. If I'm 25 year
Come on forward.
license, if I'm 25 years license gun owner, right, and I'm a pilot. They took my license away, and I'm a pilot. $200 my plane. I'm gonna lose my job, they're gonna trust me flying 200. I'm bad there on the pilot, here I'm banded, but they gonna trust me on the pilot, fly 200 people with me or no? I'm a school bus driver, and I have a license 25 years. They banned me from guns license. They're gonna trust me to drive school to the school? What's gonna happen to my job? They're gonna make me criminal? What's gonna
So
happen?
basically what you're saying is, professionally, we are all professionals, you know, so let's say you would have so the reason why they're taking the firearms away, they're saying they're a risk. But at the hands of a legal, law-abiding, certified gun owner, they're saying they're a risk. Yet, on my professional life, I could be a bus driver driving your children to school, that's okay. However, by me owning a firearm, that firearm is a risk.
Yeah, I could be a pilot and have 300 passengers at 30,000 feet in the air, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'll take away your firearm because you're a criminal.
Or they're gonna fire me because they don't trust me. They put me criminal and I've done nothing.
And this is what this is about here. And you think your property rights, and where does it stop?
That's
Right? What, like define property. And when you look at by definition, right? And we talked about firearms earlier, and it's all by definition and the way they write things. And there's firearms that are on there that are identified, and there's other firearms that are identical, just a different name that are not on there,
Yeah.
but they do the exact same thing, correct?
absolutely.
And this is what people don't understand, right? Whether it's, we're gonna ban all Lamborghinis, we're gonna allow Ferraris, right? And that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing,
Exactly.
right? There's firearms that are on the list, and there's firearms that are on the list, but they do the exact same thing. But if you, unfortunately, own this firearm, you're screwed. But if you own this firearm, you're okay, right?
Absolutely.
It's funny, the
For now.
firearm in question at the beginning, the AR-15, it fires a .223 bullet, which is the same caliber as a .22 rifle. Yes, it has more velocity, of course, but those firearms are still restricted to 5 rounds.
Remember that, in Canada, those
5 rounds.
Yeah,
5
all
rounds.
rifles, so only 5
not
rounds.
30.
Yeah,
And that's important, and that's important to distinguish and understand, because when you listen to certain politicians that want you to vote in their favor, they will use the word 30-round clips.
Yeah.
They won't define it and say, but it could only shoot 5, right? And if you're an honorable gun owner, that everything we just talked about for the last while, and you meet all the rules and regulations, it's only going to shoot 5, right? But we're going to tell you the world out there it's 30 rounds and etc. Right? We're going to scare you, and then you're going to sit in your house and right.
So what you just said, let's go back to that. Let's go back to how the left spins things. I have to say the left, or the anti-gun lobby. How about that? So the AR-15 or the assault rifle will kill the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. Well, not in Canada, because we're restricted to 5 rounds. Okay, now we've shut that argument down, right? We can push that aside, and they'll say, like we said with the car, but do you need a firearm? Do you need a firearm? No.
No.
Do you need a guitar?
Yeah.
Why? You can just watch a band on YouTube,
But I enjoy the guitar.
but you don't need it.
But I want it.
But you don't need it, because do you need a soccer ball?
My
You
daughter
need-
does,
She can just watch soccer on TV.
but she likes to play soccer.
That's the argument we're having now. So they're
But
saying,
it's not even an argument, it's a fact.
do you need a firearm? No, I don't, but I use it as a hobby.
Correct.
To shoot a projectile out a barrel to a target, and I'm trying to keep it at the.
And the ones that are sitting there going like, yeah, yeah, the same things with a knife, same things with an appliance, same thing with a car, same thing with a fertilizer we talked about earlier, and if they keep going on that list about when you're looking at mass destruction or whichever, right? So if you want to argue the facts, we'll put the facts forward, but you're not going to be able to argue them because what your analogy, they don't make sense. Right? So when you're looking at that, the truth is you're law-abiding citizens, you're family members, society members, business people, individuals, male, female, doesn't matter the gender. And if you've attained a weapon, a firearm, but it's I'm telling you, it's like program.
Yeah.
You've attained a firearm legally, meeting all the criteria, meeting all the rules and regulations, abiding by them because you don't want to lose that sport, that ability to do what you love doing. No different than soccer, no different than gun collection, no different than whatever, right? And you're staying, and now you're and then you're also waiting. when is the hammer gonna fall, right? When is the other shoe gonna fall? And that's what you're waiting for right now. And I'll guarantee you, and I said this earlier, your military, your law enforcement of any type, and border, anybody that wants a gun that does enforcement, you'll be in the same boat. The same people enforcing it, and you're going to be in the same boat, and you're going to have your properties taken away from you also, right? And again, you talked about the restricted, the unrestricted, and all you the farmers and landowners, and you know, like I'm on 4 acres, but there's farmers out there that have to take care of the livestock and the whole 9 yards and properties and so forth, and there's so you're going to lose it too. You're going to lose stuff that you own. And it's going to be taken away from you because somebody in a political position made a decision to take it away from you, right?
Again, we said we're heavily vetted, but we're heavily trained and educated on the subject. Where we shoot, we get police officers coming in and that shoot with us in our IDPA competition, and they are amazed at how well we can shoot. But they're also amazed, as like Paresh said, the safety that we go through. Police officers, again, this is an educational moment, do not necessarily have a PAL or an RPAL. They are certified through the government or through the governing body. So they cannot go out like us and purchase a firearm legally in Canada. They go through their own training, as we do. If you can think about that, because everyone said, a lot of people say, oh, you don't need a firearm, I just want the police officers to have a firearm. We're just as trained, if not sometimes better trained, than the regular police officer.
And I'm going to support what Demetre's saying right now. When I was back in corrections, this is back in my Regional Correctional Treatment Center days, and there was a law enforcement officer, OPP, had walked in, and we were in the reception front area, in the secured area, locked in there, and he had an ASP baton. I was ASP trained. I was an ASP instructor and that kind of stuff. He hardly knew how to use his ASP baton. And he said they were just issued, but didn't have enough, they hardly had any training on it. Right? An ASP baton, as an instructor, as an ASP instructor, a lot of the students, I'd be able to rip the baton out of their hands at the beginning and then strike them down with it, right? It is I'm going to call it a weapon, a baton, and that is like it's made to defend yourself and to control the situation, right? And when I looked at that individual was not trained, they just was holstering it. So that's why I understood. I clicked what you said because I actually remember teaching him how to use it properly and how to arm and disarm, right? So it was very, and you're right. And then just because you're in that field, it doesn't mean they're trained. And it depends on the department, depends on everything.
They go through their safety training and how to use a firearm, but after that, every year their qualifications to maintain their firearm is.
But that's why people in the field, and this is why I'm going to say, and I know this for a fact because back in my background in correction, those in the field that do it as a life-saving tool, like law enforcement, that's why they do it in personal life. They want to maintain that training. They want to maintain, and that's why they do that. That's the extra training. No different than when I always maintain my martial arts and that kind of stuff. Because when I was in that field, I needed to stay in shape. Why I lost a lot of weight again, because I felt myself at the 50s, like, oh my God, where am I going here, right? So I got back into my who I was, same thing, right? That's why these law enforcement officers go to these ranges and are part of these clubs and part of these communities and all that, because they want to maintain their training, because that is a tool that they use in their day-to-day operations, right?
Their life depends on it.
Absolutely. Their life and their partner's life and their community's life and it's a citizen's life.
Yeah. I mean, we don't like to put the police down or law enforcement down. We're big supporters of them. Because, I mean, reality of it, and the fact is, they are there to protect us.